Pixar is one of the highest performing and most consistently excellent movie studios in the world. But like any creative work, their movies can be split up into tiers. First, there are films that are widely regarded as modern masterpieces, pushing animation and storytelling to the highest level and beyond. Then there are films that are good but fall short of greatness in some way. And finally, there's Cars 2, which is often considered to be Pixar's weakest film to date, on a lower tier apart from the rest. In light of the release of Cars 3, let's take a closer look at the first two movies in this trilogy. Why did Cars 2 fall flat, and why might the first Cars film actually be much better than you remember?
Mix a story with the laboratory, get a story laboratory.
When Cars was released in May 2006, it marked the last movie independently produced by Pixar before the Disney-Pixar merger that same year. For some reason, I think it's tempting for people to write Cars off as just a kids movie more than maybe any other Pixar franchise. And I think this is partially a result of its very successful merchandising campaign. Cars merchandise has raked in a hefty $10 billion in sales since its release, which I think speaks for itself. I mean, kids like their toy cars, right? But when we take a closer look at the first movie, we can actually see some pretty interesting things going on under the hood. When it comes to genre, Cars is essentially a sports film. While this kind of story is usually pretty straightforward, it has a few strong story elements baked into its structure just because of the way sports work. For example, all sports stories will include a clear external goal for its main character to reach for, usually winning the game and obtaining a trophy, as well as a strong protagonist-antagonist relationship. Since sports pit one team or individual against another, there will always be one winner and one loser. A compelling antagonist in any story will often want the same thing as the protagonist when you strip everything else down, as this gives the antagonist a reason to be very actively working against the protagonist throughout the story. And this is true out of necessity in sports films. In the case of Cars, Lightning McQueen and Chick Hicks are both competing for the Piston Cup. That being said, Lightning McQueen is a character designed to achieve his goal. In order to win the Piston Cup, he must be faster than all the other race cars, and as we know from the opening sequence, he was built for speed.
Okay, here we go. Focus. Speed. I am speed.
While Lightning's external goal becomes clear very quickly, his internal problem is equally apparent. Through a series of disrespectful interactions with his crew, we see that Lightning's flaw is selfishness and pride. He doesn't like having to depend on others, nor does he appreciate them, and he nearly loses the opening race because of it when he refuses to take a pit stop despite his crew's advice.
We need tires now, come on, let's go! No tires, just gas! You need tires, you idiot!
When the race is determined to be a three-way tie, Lightning's problem further manifests itself when he insists that his truck, Mac, drive through the night to get to California before either of the other racers for the big tiebreaker race. As a result of this overzealous desire to move fast and be first in everything, he gets left behind when Mac falls asleep on the road and finds himself in Radiator Springs, the slow-moving, small, lazy town that is the antithesis of all that Lightning represents. Like we've discussed in other videos, this is Lightning's catalyst, the story event that flips his world upside down. This situation also exemplifies one of Pixar's 22 rules of storytelling, which says, what is your character good at, comfortable with? Throw the polar opposite at them. Challenge them. How do they deal? Soon, Lightning meets Doc Hudson, the acting Radiator Springs judge and doctor, who determines that Lightning must fix the town's road, which he ruined during his dramatic entrance, before he's allowed to continue to California for his big race. Now, the idea of this broken road is actually a significant image, but we'll get back to that in a moment. Doc Hudson is an important figure in Lightning's journey because in this story, he is the wise old man character, which typically introduces some sort of mystical wisdom to our hero that is initially disregarded but later accepted. When Lightning struggles to make a left turn on the dirt track, Doc tells Lightning that instead of turning left, he should actually be thinking of things differently.
I'll put it simple. If you're going hard enough left, you'll find yourself turning right. Oh, right. That makes perfect sense. Turn right to go left. Yes!
Here, Doc introduces the idea of the paradox by suggesting that sometimes the solution to our problems are contradictory. And more importantly, sometimes what you actually need is the opposite of what you think you need. This idea is further exemplified by the image of the broken road from earlier. While Lightning initially repairs the road very quickly using his tremendous speed, he actually makes the road worse because he does a rush job. Here, Lightning begins to learn that in order to do things right, he must slow down. This is where we can start to connect the dots thematically, because we're learning with Lightning through the lens of paradox, that to get what he wants, the piston cup, he must go fast. But to get what he needs, an empathy and appreciation for others, he must slow down. This makes the final race sequence all the more satisfying, because the story is respecting the rules of this dilemma that Lightning is presented with in his journey. He can't win both what he wants and what he needs, and must sacrifice one for the other. In a compelling moment that demonstrates Lightning's conscious choice of internal growth over external glory, he rejects the win to push a fallen racer to the finish line.
What are you doing, kid?
I think the king should finish his last race.
Again, what I think is really cool about telling this kind of story with the car as our main character, as opposed to, say, a human, is that here's a guy who is designed to go fast. That's his nature. That's the only thing he knows how to do well. And to learn his lesson, he must defy that nature. And that's the piece that I think really connects with us as humans, because if all we think about is the destination, we don't have time to appreciate the journey along the way. So now you're all geared up and ready to go watch Cars 3, right? Well, before you do that, let's not forget the middle child. Cars 2 was Pixar's first effort to continue the Cars franchise, being released in 2011, 5 years after the original film. Rather than pushing Cars 2 in a similar direction by telling another sports story, this installment takes a bit of a detour as a spy film. Here's a recap of some of the major story beats to get us up to speed. Finn, a British secret agent, discovers that this suspicious-looking car is up to no good on a big oil rig. Meanwhile, Lightning returns to Radiator Springs but is immediately challenged by Francesco, an Italian race car, to compete in the World Grand Prix. Lightning then takes Mater and the gang along with him to several locations across the world to race. When secret agent Finn mistakes Mater for his associate, Mater unwittingly gets involved in the agent's investigation. When some of the racers in the Grand Prix start exploding, we learn that the suspicious-looking car from earlier is using a device to destroy cars who are using a particular kind of fuel. After a series of mishaps and a struggle with his insecurity, Mater finally realizes what he's caught up in, and helps to expose this guy, Sir Axelrod, as the mastermind behind the scheme to cash in with his oil business. If you're kind of confused, you should be. One big question I came away from this movie asking was, who is this story about? And when you have to ask that question, there's a good chance that something's not quite working. Is the movie about Mater? We certainly see an inner transformation in this character from beginning to end, which is promising. He struggles with his insecurity and the way other people tend to see him as a fool, and ultimately accepts that this can be a source of strength. Or is the movie about Lightning? The first act of the film certainly leans in that direction, as Lightning is the one who accepts the call to adventure and brings his friends along for the ride. Or is the movie about Secret Agent Finn? He's the one we're first introduced to, and since neither Mater or Lightning have any idea what's going on until 3/4 into the movie, Finn is the one who is up against our antagonist for most of the story, and really understands what the stakes are. The point is, this juggling act between characters and their competing roles in the story takes away from a lot of the impact the film could have achieved if it had simply settled on one of these paths. What we're left with is a fun spy movie with an element of self-empowerment kind of slapped on the back like a bumper sticker. Now, is fun a bad thing to have in a movie? Of course not. Especially in a comedy, it's an essential ingredient. However, on its own, it's not quite enough. I think Pixar director Pete Docter put it best when he said that there are 3 things you should give to an audience through your story. Something to laugh about, something to think about, and something to feel. If a story only puts one of these things forward, it's going to fall short. With all of this in mind, I think Cars 2 feels more like a spin-off in the Cars world, whereas Cars 3, in my opinion, is more of a true spiritual successor to the first film. What do you think? If this is your first time at Story Laboratory and you enjoyed watching this video, hit subscribe to see more, and remember, story is king above all movie things.
Do, 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 do.